It's here. We are redefining what it means to sit at the girls' table.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Girls Table, a podcast where founders, careers, and investors share their stories. Today, I'm joined by Alexandra Wilson, who was the co-founder of e-commerce sensation Gilt, which grew to $650 million in revenue within 5 years of its launch and sold to Hudson's Bay Corporation. She was also the co-founder of beauty services leader GLAMSQUAD, as well as the closet organizing and styling company Fitz, which later sold to Tradesy. Today, Alexandra is a co-founder and managing partner of the growth equity fund called Clerisy, investing in consumer and techsumer companies. Alexandra has been an avid angel investor and/or advisor to over 80 consumer tech companies, including Rent the Runway, The Mirror, Carbon 38, Tula, and Flow Commerce, just to name a few. Alexandra is also the co-author of By Invitation Only, How We Built Gilt and Changed the Way Millions Shop. So, Alexandra, I don't know if I missed anything, but thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Yeah, I'm so happy and finally to connect and chat with you. And you really had such an impressive background. And so the first question I kind of had just to start off is, what were you like as a kid and what did you originally want to be when you grew up?
So I grew up in New York City, was a little girl running around the mean streets of New York. I'm teasing. And, you know, as many little girls do, I had many different dreams. You know, at one point I wanted to be a gymnast. At one point I thought women should be able to be president of the United States. I had, you know, all kinds of ideas. But, you know, I say those in jest. I think the entrepreneurial bug did catch me at a young age. I was one of those little girls who thought an idea of a fun play date was creating a lemonade stand and selling things, and always had this excitement about commerce. And, you know, so even though it was a circuitous route to get there, it shouldn't be a surprise to me or my parents when thinking back to my childhood that I did go down a path of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was actually part of that lemonade stand era too, but instead of actually sitting there waiting for people to come, I went into my friend's closet, took all their food, and then I started traveling. So I was a traveling lemonade stand, and I'd go to neighbors and just be like, do you want to buy pretzels? Do you want to buy this? And really, it was all my friend's pantry items that she had in the closet. So...
Well, that's taking advantage of opportunities. So I commend you. That's the hustle that entrepreneurs need.
Yeah. So right after graduating from Harvard, you actually worked in investment banking. So did you have an idea at that point of what you were interested in or what you wanted to pursue down the road?
So I went to Harvard, and as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study, I think my parents were hoping that I might focus on economics, and what I ultimately ended up studying was foreign literatures, so Romance languages and literatures, which were French, Spanish, and Portuguese. So it was as though I were an English major, except I was doing it in other languages, so reading constantly. I was already pretty my mother's Cuban, by the way, so my Spanish is native, and, you know, spent a lot of time studying French and Portuguese and then later Italian. And I'm telling you this because I convinced my parents to let me study what I wanted and promised them that later I would get an MBA and get that business experience and education under my belt. And they thought that was fair to be able to study what I wanted. And so my 4 years in university, studied Romance languages and literatures, and then wanted to go into investment banking because I was curious about business, and went to work for Merrill Lynch. So I did a summer 1998 in the Latin America group, mostly in Brazil. And then when I graduated in 1999, I spent a year in New York and then 2 years in London. And I really enjoyed the international aspect of the experience and got to use my languages and all the deals that I was assigned, but wasn't necessarily passionate about the day-to-day of investment banking. And so then went back to studying and went to get my MBA. And that's when I had a chance to hone in on what is it that I really did enjoy from a category and a sector experience, which was ultimately consumer focused.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome that you study what you want, because you're so young when you first go to school. And at that time, it's like, you just got to do whatever interests you. And then as your path shows, it's like eventually you found your way. So a few years.
So young. I mean, to be 18 years old and making big decisions like that. And I know in many countries at 18 or even younger, kids have to decide what trade they ultimately want to go into and really specialize. And I'm glad that one of the aspects of an American liberal arts experience is that you should be allowed to study what it is that interests and motivates you, and then later be able to specialize.
Yeah. So then a few years later, you founded Gilt, which is an online shopping and lifestyle e-commerce company that launched in 2007 and grew to over $650 million in revenue within 5 years before it was eventually sold in 2016. So could you tell us a little bit more about Gilt and how it all came to be back in the mid-2000s?
Sure. Well, for your listeners, if you can think back to 2007, the world looked very different. The way consumers shopped, the way they interacted with their cell phones or BlackBerries back then was very, very different. So what we did was take the excitement of a New York City sample sale and bring that experience online in an exciting format. And later, this industry became known as the flash sale industry, but flash sale concepts, that wasn't a term we knew when we were creating the company. We really just wanted to recreate the excitement of a sample sale in an online format. And I was 30 years old when we started Gilt. I'm glad. I had no idea how hard it would be. I'm glad that I was a little bit naive in the beginning of the journey, because there was so much to learn. And I think it really put me on the map in terms of being an entrepreneur. And I'm glad I was young too, and I didn't have children yet at that time. So I devoted my all to the company. And functionally, what I did, we were 5 co-founders, by the way. I love starting businesses with co-founders. I think the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And what I focused on was really convincing brands starting back in 2007 to sell their inventory to us so that we could sell it in an online format. And back then, it was very challenging to convince brands to do this. So I just didn't take no for an answer. I went to every trade show I could. I took every meeting I could set up. Any door that could be opened to me, I opened it and politely tried to bang down the door until brands would eventually say yes. And, had many no's, but that just kept me motivated and pushing forward. And then ultimately we had tens and then hundreds and then thousands of brands that we would sell on Gilt.com every single day.
And were you ever scared? I mean, you had the best education that's possible. You went to Harvard, then you're getting your MBA from Harvard. You have the investment banking background, and then you go to work at a startup. So what really convinced you to work at Gilt and really just take that leap of faith?
Yeah, so of course it's scary. Startups are very scary, especially your first time. I remember going to my parents to tell, and I had just gotten married, by the way, just a few months before launching Gilt. And so I went to my parents and spoke to my husband, and my dad encouraged me to put on a piece of paper, what are the pros and cons of taking this leap versus staying where I was. At the time, I was in charge of retail operations for the Italian luxury goods company, Bulgari. And it was I'm visual. So when I saw on a piece of paper how much longer and more exciting the list of pros was than the list of cons, it was one of these moments where it was like, I have to try. And I had to be comfortable with failure. So it was very cognizant of, what if our idea doesn't work? What if we run out of money, like most startups do? What if? And if I was comfortable with all the worst case scenarios of the what ifs, then it was clear that I could handle the risk at that moment in time. And all the positive possibility was so exciting to me. And one of my co-founders was one of my best friends. She's still one of my best friends, Alexis Maybank. And that was really exciting to be able to build something together along with our other co-founders. And we went for it. But of course it's scary. Of course it's difficult. Anyone who tells you that a startup is easy is completely lying to you. So, eyes wide open, but it's also the most exciting and exhilarating achievement to create something from an idea and to turn that idea into an actual reality and into, in our case, it was a website that consumers loved, but many entrepreneurs might create physical products, foods, you name it, what that startup could be. It can be anything, literally. But for us, it was a site that consumers visited every single day, addictively. And we really changed the way millions of people shopped back in 2007.
Yeah, and you've started so many companies now. So I just want to touch on, how did you come up with this problem being the one that you want to solve? How did you decide, okay, this is our idea and this is what I'm going to spend all that time? Kind of even before you got into the pros and cons, because sometimes I feel like it's hard to even come up with an idea to actually build something, nonetheless, to then execute.
So I didn't overthink it. I mean, there was a lot of gut instinct, yes or no, are we doing this or not, decision making. And in my case, I felt like the business was going to start with or without me. So the other co-founders were doing this, and the question was, they were trying to convince me to join because they felt that they needed me. But if I, for whatever reason, had decided, no, it's not for me, it's too risky, they would have had to find another co-founder who could figure out how to get the merchandise and the inventory. And I did not want to be left out. I wanted to be part of this. I wanted to build this from the ground up because I believed in the vision and the excitement. I understood that consumer better than anyone. I really understood the consumer. As a consumer, I'm usually pretty, I like to try new things. I like technology and always loved fashion since I was a little girl, back to your initial question, and have always been a consumer who really hates paying full price. I love the thrill of a hunt, of a deal, of a currency, currency fluctuations when traveling and taking advantage of a strong dollar or whatever the case may be, or a tax, refund of some sort. So I really understood this consumer and didn't overthink it. I mean, this was a decision made in days and weeks, not months and years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you started in 2007 and then it ultimately sold in 2016. So how did you grow personally or professionally during this time at Gilt? And what feelings did you walk away with at the end of that journey?
So I really grew up at Gilt in so many ways. I mentioned I had just gotten married. Those first 3 years, I worked myself to the bone. And then in 2010, had my first child. And then 2013, my second child. And, I grew so much. I mean, we went from being a team of 5 co-founders to, at the peak, Gilt had 1,300 employees. So I learned how to manage people. I learned how to give feedback to people. I learned how to motivate people. I learned how to listen. I learned how to lead, and I learned how to sometimes follow. I learned how to raise money. I learned how to speak to the media, how to speak to consumers, how to speak to brands, global brands, very senior people, CEOs from brands all around the world. So it was really kind of my coming of age and maturity, and I had experiences I never would have had at that young age, and given my years of experience, if I had stayed at a big company. I mean, it would have taken me potentially decades to have the experience that I had right off the bat, and that was exciting for me. I'm a person with a lot of energy, and I had that energy to give. And then along the journey, I got to meet so many incredible founders who, many of them were women, many of them came out of Harvard or HBS, and many of them for various reasons were inspired by our story of we were a team of 5, as I've mentioned, but 2 of us are women. And so I think that the female entrepreneurship story resonated with many, and we wrote a book about the journey. And so I got involved initially as an advisor, and then in the later years started making angel investments in many startups. Not all of them succeeded, that's for sure. But that was also exciting for me to be able to share with other founders so many of the lessons that I had learned, share the mistakes that I made, share the successes. And one of the things that I love doing and that I think I'm good at is making introductions and connecting people and being a dot connector. So I've been able to do that and pay it forward to probably hundreds of founders over the years, and I really enjoy that.
I feel like that's one of my favorite parts too, especially in venture, where one of the main things I do is really connect people, connect to investors, connect to other founders and partnerships. So that's definitely one of my favorite parts. But so in addition to Gilt, you also co-founded both beauty services leader GLAMSQUAD and peer-to-peer luxury re-commerce company Fitz. So first of all, I was looking at your bio. How have you had time for all this? I feel like we haven't even gone to so much of the other stuff that you've done so far. So like, what keeps you really just motivated and inspired every day?
I love meeting people. I love learning from them. I love understanding what's new. And as an operator, I like building things that are coming into the future. I like building things early and kind of understanding where's the puck going, what does the consumer want, and building that. And over the years, starting as an angel investor and now as my full-time role, which is being managing partner of a growth equity fund called Clerisy that I co-founded with a woman named Lisa Myers, we are investing in companies that are innovating and solving problems and fulfilling consumers' needs. And it's all about where the puck is going, taking into account what's happening in the world, the ups, the downs. We started raising our fund during COVID, then we've had markets the way they've been the past year, many changes to navigate, and just really looking for innovation, looking for great founders and leaders. And I've hired so many people over the years, starting with my Gilt experience and then onwards from there. And we didn't even mention it, but I spent 2.5 years working in corporate America. I actually worked at Allergan, a big pharma company. So that was a lot of fun too, seeing how big public companies create and innovate. And I was really brought in as the person to focus and think about the consumer for a company that had a $5 billion aesthetics portfolio. So if you think of products like Botox, Juvederm, Cool Sculpting, I was really focused on thinking about what were ventures that we could create and build from scratch that could help educate consumers about these drugs and devices and help answer questions and make consumers feel a little bit more comfortable trying things they had questions about. So yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying being an investor because I love the variety of businesses, of people, of perspectives, of categories is really motivating and exciting to me. So I would say one of my favorite parts of my day-to-day today is that variety.
Yeah. And when you were building, I feel like you're an operator at heart, given that you've built so many companies now, and you're also even building out Clerisy. But were there any common themes or key things that you did each day and that you focused on when you were building each of these companies?
So all the companies that I was involved in building and creating, I really was the consumer for each of those businesses at the moment in time that I was building them. That doesn't mean that I need to invest in companies where I'm the consumer. I can very much think through a completely different type of consumer. But the ones that I built, I really understood innately what is it that consumer wants. How do they behave currently? How can we create something to fulfill consumer needs and holes? So I think that for me was a a common thread. So the same woman, and then Gilt wasn't only for selling for women. We evolved into men and had a really good men's business, but initially we focused on the female consumer. So it was, high fashion, exciting fashion, then products for the home, then there was a travel component, then there was kids. That consumer was Gilt. I understood her. Then when I went on to my GLAMSQUAD days, that woman was for the most part urban, time-starved, busy, cared about her appearance, and was thrilled at the convenience of having someone come to their home or their office or hotel room if they were traveling to help them get ready for high-stakes moments, whether they were professional or personal moments. And then, Fitz with the organizing closets, same thing, same consumer. We had a resale component in there as well. And then to Allergan, it was the same woman worried about her wrinkles and aging and wanting to care about her experience and women who cared about their appearance and wanted to look natural and also had questions maybe about how much things cost. So consumer arc and journey actually was pretty consistent. Now, as an investor, I think about all consumers. I'm not just investing in companies or looking at companies where I'm the end consumer. So that's quite different. And that's fun. I can easily change the mindset of who a consumer could be for a specific product or service.
Yeah. So I'm about to dive into Clerisy, but one last question regarding building. What has been the biggest mistake? I feel like you're a mentor to so many entrepreneurs. So what's the biggest mistake that you see founders make when they're first starting out and building a company?
Oh my gosh, there are a lot of mistakes that get made. I would say two areas of mistakes that I do see over and over can be interpersonal dynamics, and call it co-founder dynamics, or it could be early team hire dynamics where not everyone is on the same page. So that can come in many different shapes and sizes, but could be, for example, one co-founder might want to build something as quickly as possible, flip it as quickly as possible, make some money, and then move on to the next one, for example. Whereas the other co-founder maybe thinks, this is going to be the job for the rest of my life. I want to do this forever. I love what I'm building. I would never want to flip it. And so, that's just one example of where founders could clash, or directions you want to take the company, anything related to fundraising, running out of cash. I mean, that's definitely a mistake that I see over and over. And I think that founders today have to recognize the climate that we're in, and it's not that easy to raise money right now for founders. And founders do need to keep their eye on cash and do need to think about profitability in a way that maybe 3 years ago or 2 years ago they weren't. And I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of founders run out of cash. And so all the founders I care about out there, when they check in with me or ask me for advice, I say, keep your eye on your cash. It's super important.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it too from the venture perspective, and you are definitely as well, where it's just not as easy to raise capital right now. And it's really hard. And if they're burning through the cash that they have on hand, it's going to be a lot harder to raise in the future. So I agree with those. So in 2020, you co-founded Clerisy, a growth equity firm investing in consumer and techsumer companies. So why did you originally start Clerisy, and what made it unique?
So I was at Allergan, which I mentioned a little while ago, and summer of 2019, it was announced that Allergan was getting acquired for $63 billion. And wow. I know, crazy numbers having come from small startup world, which is one of the reasons I love that experience. So summer 2019, I started speaking to Lisa Myers, who is a woman that I had gotten to know while she was a partner at L. Catterton. And I shared with her that I was starting to think about what I would do when I left Allergan, and told her that I was pretty sure I wanted to go into investing. And I was just starting down that path, thinking through what that would look like, meaning, would I join an existing fund? What stage fund? Would I want to start something of my own? These were all things going through my head. And Lisa confided in me that she was planning on starting a fund, and she wanted to focus on the growth equity stage because she felt that that was really an area that had a lot of opportunity. And the more we started talking about the opportunities, the sectors, the categories, we realized we were like-minded in so many ways. Lisa, as a successful investor over the years, and myself as a business builder and operator. So we got really excited about partnering together and creating Clerisy. And starting a fund is like a marriage. I mean, it really is. It's long-term. It's not a quick fix. There's going to be ups and downs in starting a fund. And we were both very much aware of that. So we had many conversations about how we wanted our partnership to work, what we wanted to focus on in terms of stage and categories. And then we started having initial conversations with some prospective investors before COVID started. And then COVID really kicked in, obviously, March 2020. And we put some of those fundraising conversations on pause and just spent a lot of time on Zoom speaking to founders and listening to how they were navigating the pandemic in the early stages. And then that summer 2020, we re-picked up the fundraising conversations, and we did our first close of the fund October 2020. And then we were really off to the races. And during that time, I moved from New York to Miami. Lisa left New York and moved full-time to the Bahamas, which is her main home and where she raised her children. And we brought on an amazing VP to join us in the journey. He joined us before we had closed, so he was taking a risk as well. We were all taking risks. I mean, it's been incredible. And one thing I did not realize as a founder is how entrepreneurial it is for a new fund. I mean, creating a new fund is incredibly entrepreneurial, and I never had that perspective. As a founder of a company, I didn't think of investors as entrepreneurs, but they really are. I mean, they really, really are.
Oh my God, I feel like every step of the way with Redbeard has been like building it from the ground up. And really, I feel like every part of building a company is kind of similar to building out a fund. And you also raised yours at a very hard time. I mean, it was 2020. People are still kind of feeling very uncomfortable with the world. So first off, congratulations, because I feel like that was a really hard time to raise capital before the year later when it became a bull market. So that's awesome.
Well, thank you. I mean, it as a founder and business builder, I like moving really quickly, and the fundraising process can take time, especially when you're speaking with potential investors who don't know you and you're meeting them over Zoom for the first time. So that can just take longer than I certainly expected. And what ended up happening with our investor base, which has actually been fantastic and helpful for the fund, is that many of our investors are actually founders themselves who have had relevant exits. And so it's helpful for deal flow. It's helpful for diligence. It just helps with all the connectivity. And the word Clerisy actually means a group of learned, collaborative people. And our whole idea is to bring these people together. And sometimes we introduce our LPs to one another when we think there could be opportunities for them. And, things always have a way of working out. It might not be the way initially envisioned, in the tech world when you're starting a business and things start to change, you call it a pivot, and that's totally acceptable. And, we've been living in interesting times of uncertainty, bull markets, crypto winters, you name it.
Yeah. So you invest in consumer and techsumer companies. Is there any specific sector within consumer and techsumer that really just excites you, that you're really focusing on?
There are lots of areas that excite us. And so we've made 3 investments so far. The first was a company called Dormify. So if you know any Gen Zers going to college, it's really the perfect online destination for everything that a student going to college would want to purchase to get their dorm room ready. And we've expanded that business. So it's not just dorm essentials, but it's really lifestyle products for the Gen Z consumer. So not only relevant for back to school season, but throughout the year. The second business we invested in is a fintech company called Union, which is a point of sale system for high volume hospitality that also manages inventory for high volume bars and restaurants, and also becomes a way for food and beverage companies to market directly to relevant consumers through a consumer-facing app and experience. Our third investment was a non-alcoholic spirits company called CleanCo. So think non-alc tequila, gin, rum, vodka, whiskey, which is a big trend. I mean, the health and wellness trend is obviously huge, but non-alc is a really exciting growing trend. I mean, we like to look at companies that are innovating. You know, we don't want to invest in the fourth of something that exists. We want to invest in a business that's cutting edge. I would say our mindset is very private equity focused in the sense that we look for profitability or a very clear path to profitability. So that has been a criteria before it was popular among many. I would say from the get-go, we really do care about EBITDA and look for it. And we're looking for businesses over 10 million in revenue. So already have figured out product market fit. They need capital to scale and they need help. And we get as involved in companies as we need to. I mean, we really are happy and able to roll up our sleeves and jump in. And some founders love that, and some founders maybe feel like they don't need the help, and that's great. If they don't need help, you know, we still may invest even if they don't need help. And if we think that the team's got it and doesn't need the support, but we would love to make a beauty investment. It's a category we love. We know very well. Both Lisa and I have had a lot of experience in beauty. We haven't yet made an investment in the category, so we are on the hunt. If you know any innovative, profitable beauty, health and wellness companies, send them our way. We look at food and beverage. We look at, healthcare is an area, if it really has a consumer component, that we would look at. Not biotech. It has to be businesses that we inherently understand, where we believe we could add value as consumer experts. And in some cases, it may depend on previous investors that are in a company. So if we can provide a different perspective from existing investors, I think sometimes founders really appreciate that.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Do you see yourself going back on the operating side of the house and starting another company, or where do you kind of see the future?
Well, we're only a few years into this fund, so I am fully entrenched and committed to Clerisy for quite some time. I feel like even though it's been a few years, we're just getting started. We still have capital to deploy. We need to help our portfolio companies grow and take them through to exit. And as you know, building a fund is a long-term. I don't even think about life beyond Clerisy, because that's a long time from now. So I'm really enjoying the day-to-day, meeting new founders constantly, and really learning. It's really fun to be able to continue to learn every single day. I love that.
Yeah. And were there any specific mentors that helped you get to where you are? And is there any advice you have for others that are looking at finding inspirational career mentors?
Yes, there have been many people over the years who have helped me, who have offered their time and been honest and direct with me. And it's not always the same person for every situation. I mean, sometimes you need specific advice and expertise for certain decisions and moments. So someone like Mindy Grossman has been a great advisor and friend and mentor to me in many moments throughout my career. I can think of a lot of people who've been helpful. I think my recommendation would be to create and cultivate your own personal board of directors and go to each of them for different moments and questions. And sometimes you just need a good old pep talk when you're having a lousy day and feeling down about something, or facing some sort of rejection, and go to those people in your life who will bring you up. And it doesn't even have to be an expert in what you do. Sometimes it's maybe just a friend or a family member who really gets you and understands you and understands what are the right things to say to motivate you to be your best self professionally.
Yeah. So I want to end with two final things. What are you most proud of? I feel like you've done so much, and I'm curious to know, when you look back on everything you've done, what really do you highlight and really makes you pretty happy?
I mean, I'm proud of being a mother. I have 2 kids, and I love them so much, and I am so grateful to have been able to juggle having children and not having to stop my career, and to be able to keep my foot on the gas pedal while having children and raising them. And it is a constant juggle and balance, and it's not easy, but I'm most proud of having become a mother, and very lucky my husband is a great partner in the parenting journey. And I really do think women can find a way to have it all. And maybe you can't be an A+ or an A- or even a B- at all aspects of your life at the same time. But if you can keep all the balls in the air as you're juggling, it's pretty amazing. I would have hated to miss out on giving up either creating a family or not being able to continue my professional goals and aspirations. So very grateful that I could juggle both.
I don't know how you have time for it all, because I feel like that's a whole completely different conversation. Like, between working out, eating healthy, going to the grocery store, seeing friends, working, to then adding kids into the mix. Honestly, I feel like more and more women are doing it nowadays, but I feel like it is so hard to be able to kind of do it all.
It's hard, and I probably do less of the first things you mentioned, sadly. But being organized is really important. And I think ever since I was a little girl, I like to be organized. I like to make my to-do lists. I'm obsessed with my calendar, and anytime I have something to do, I put it into the calendar so I know exactly when I'm going to get to that item. And, as a mother, I have color-coded calendars. I have the kids' calendar. I can see my work calendar, in an organized way. And so I think, people joke around. If you want to get something done, you give it to the busiest person and they get it done. And I think working moms are often those who can get things done and really multitask and don't take no for an answer, and they keep plugging through.
Yeah. So I want to end it with, is there any final piece of advice that you have for the people listening today?
Sure. Well, I like to say, as soon as you can figure out what you're good at and what you enjoy doing, you're at an advantage. And if you can marry what you're good at and what you enjoy doing with a career, I mean, that's pretty incredible. And for some people, they're able to do that very early in their career journey. Some people, it might take a decade or 2 decades to figure that out, but do your best to figure it out.
Awesome. Alexandra, thank you so much for coming on today. If people want to follow you, where is the best place to reach you and follow along on your journey?
Sure. Well, basic social media, LinkedIn professionally is usually my go-to. I'm in there all the time. So Alexandra Wilson, you can find me in there. But I'm also less active on Twitter and Instagram. So I would say go to LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and appreciate you coming on to the Girls Table.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.